The wait is over in more ways than one. I know a lot of people have been messaging us about the Shout podcast. Everybody wanted the immediate reaction, but I'm glad we waited a little bit of time because I think we have a larger picture of what this decision looks like. There's still a ton of questions, and we're going to bring up the questions that we have that are going to have to be answered by Brandon Beane in the next couple of days. But Joe Brady is the new Buffalo Bills head coach. 2.5 years as the offensive coordinator. He ends up being the winner after the Bills interview 9 candidates. The one they started the process with, Joe Brady, is the choice. Welcome into Shout. Ryan Talbot, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I couldn't do that immediate. I was teaching about the Greek gods today, but we're here now and plenty to talk about after being able to sit on this for a few hours.
All right, so let's start with the choice itself and how Brandon Beane set the stage for this last week. He said it was going to be, they're going to uncover every rock. They were going to, it didn't matter if you were a new coach, an old coach, experienced, or first-time head coach. They wanted a chance to talk to as many people as they could. So they ended up interviewing 9 candidates, including a couple of veteran coaches, Lou Anarumo, Brian Dable in the mix, some potential eyebrow-raising first-time head coaches like Phil Rivers, Grant Udinski is a name, and Nate Schlierhaus were names, young up-and-coming coaches. They ultimately land on Joe Brady, and I have so many different ping-ponging thoughts about what this potentially means. First and foremost, what I think it says by the organization is the reason they haven't gotten over the hump is Sean McDermott. Because if you're moving on from McDermott and keeping somebody from his staff who could potentially keep some of these pieces together, you're going in not a brand new direction, but like a reimagined direction here.
Yeah, and I guess that helps with building your staff if you can bring back a lot of your own guys that you like on your coaching staff that have worked under you on this offense. So that might help with the building of the offensive staff. Still TBD on the offensive coordinator, how that will all look. Is Brady calling plays? We'll find out more as time goes on. We'll talk about the defensive coordinator favorite for the job here in a little bit, but it's interesting because when Sean McDermott was fired, I sat there and said, okay, they really want to change the vision of this thing. Josh Allen, get him an offensive-minded coach, something different that can help him go to new levels. And they went with an offensive-minded coach, but they went with the one that's been in the building for a few years. And, you and I were just talking about this a few minutes before the show. Was Joe Brady a Sean McDermott guy? Not necessarily. It felt like McDermott was willing to throw Brady under the bus a few times this year, saying that, it doesn't have to be this hard for Josh Allen in this offense to move the ball, which, quite frankly, I agreed with him in those moments in those games. But now it's going to be, what was the vision that McDermott had for the offense? Did it differ from what Joe Brady wanted to do? And we're going to see that pretty quickly here in free agency and the draft based on how the Bills attack this, what they want their offense to look like, their personnel packages to look like. And at least then we'll have a better sense of, okay, maybe what we saw out of Joe Brady this last year and a half, 2.5 years, or however long it's been since he was the interim, and then obviously taking over as the full-time the last 2 seasons, what it looked like then versus what it's going to look like with him as that head coach of this team.
All right, so a couple of really big points of emphasis in a report from Jordan Schultz, and I think a collection of these have been posted by a lot of the insiders. The reasons Joe Brady was ultimately the choice for the Bills. The CEO portion of the interview stood out the most, and I've seen this from multiple insiders, that he sold the Bills on a vision for how he was going to lead this team from a CEO perspective. What's our biggest argument about Sean McDermott? I felt like he lacked that ability at times with how he kind of oversaw things at times to the detriment of the offense. Everything that happened with Leslie Frazier, and then again with Bobby Babich, like the same mistakes over and over again. taking play calling away, then giving it back, and then taking it from Babbage, and then giving it back, part-time, halftime. Nonsense. Sean McVay calls the offense there. Whatever the plan here is for Joe Brady, it's to come in with one vision for how the operation is going to run. Sure, can you make like adjustments? Can you pivot? Of course. But there has to be a vision to run the organization from a CEO perspective that I think, culture aside, culture was great with Sean McDermott. Like the way he built the program, the way he brought guys in that assimilated for the most part into his program was really, really good. But I think just that idea of running from the top down and setting the agenda for the organization, that's something that Brandon mentioned in his press conference last week, and it's something that apparently Joe Brady hit out of the park. His vision for how everything would be structured from the head coach seat was viewed as a home run. And here's the biggest part, Ryan. He also nailed the importance of alignment between coaching and player personnel. If you've been listening to Shout since last offseason, you know I have been banging this drum over and over again. There was a disconnect between the front office and the coaching staff under Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott when it came to drafting guys with a plan to play right away and to impact a Super Bowl caliber roster right away. Go and look at Atlanta this last year. They go out and they spend a ton of draft capital and in free agency on their defense, and they come out, and that was really the unit with a bunch of first-round draft picks on the offensive side of the ball that really held their season together in a lot of times. Really was the reason they beat the Bills on Monday Night Football.
Right.
So I think the biggest part of this process needed to be the alignment between the coaching staff and the front office. Here's the problem, though, Ryan. Who's responsible for drafting Keon Coleman? Who's responsible for Curtis Samuel showing up in the town? Right? These are hard questions that are going to have to be asked inside that building and at this press conference coming up. Jerry Bagula kind of opened up Pandora's box when it comes to some of the questions that are being asked that have affected the confidence level of the fan base right now in the immediate aftermath of this decision.
And when it came to Keon Coleman, Brandon Beane did say, he was my player as well. But Pagula said that was on the coaching staff. Well, who would be on the coaching staff that would be pushing for a receiver? You would think in that matter it would have been Joe Brady, and it just hasn't worked out here through 2 seasons. When it comes to Curtis Samuel, I have to pin that one somewhat on Brady without knowing the full extent of it, because that was his guy in Carolina. He produced really well in Carolina with Joe Brady. Hasn't been able to stay healthy here. He's had some moments when he's been on the field, but not nearly enough to explain that salary. So, yeah, a lot of these moves that they have made, especially at receiver in free agency with the money they've invested, hasn't looked good. Now, I will say this. The offense in the playoffs, if I felt like Joe Brady was dealing, I thought he had a great game plan for Jacksonville. I thought he had a great game plan for Denver. And if you don't turn the ball over so many times, if James Cook protects the ball, they're up, 10-3 or 14-3. If Josh Allen doesn't scramble on that last play before halftime, Denver doesn't get a free field goal out of it. And they still scored 30 points against the Denver Broncos in that defense. So he was calling good plays. And Brandon Cooks, once he got acclimated to the system, he did unleash a few new wrinkles in this offense, and having a true field stretcher, someone that you could hit on those deeper plays. Maybe that's what they were hoping for in Palmer and Samuel. It just hasn't worked out because of health issues and things like that. So when they had Cooks and playing at this level, it did feel like this offense was a little bit different than what we were complaining about or what the fans were complaining about at times. And you mentioned culture a few minutes ago. That's one thing that keeping Brady as the head coach will help with, because he saw the culture that Sean McDermott, had here, how he did things. I think that he will help maintain the culture that's been built. And that's good, because with some of these unknown entities, guys that I was very high on, Udinski specifically, who knows how that would have gone with an unproven guy, someone that's doesn't have ties to this roster, to this coaching staff. You might have brought in an all new regime. It does help from the culture perspective as well.
So a big question mark with some of these younger guys, Schleel House, Udinski. Like, these are guys that haven't been in the pressure cooker, right? Like, they've not even called plays yet. And I was a big fan after learning about Udinski and his rise, like the impact that he made in Minnesota, the impact that he made in Jacksonville. Those were all intriguing characteristics that I think get you excited about those potential ideas for that specific coach. What I think Brady has that maybe he doesn't is he's been somewhere already and failed, like significantly. Like, go back to the Carolina run. It was bad news bears there. He had to come to Buffalo, recalibrate as the quarterback's coach, work his way back up. And throughout that process, I think every area or every stop on the ladder has found a great deal of success. I don't want to minimize Joe Brady's success over the last 2 seasons. Like, I don't think, like, we remember Brian Dable's run and maybe 1 year of Ken Dorsey's run to a degree with rose-colored glasses, and we don't remember sometimes fully how polarizing, especially Dable was. Like, I remember talking Bills fans off the ledge about wanting to fire Dable, like, in the middle of that run there. And so I think the way that this offense has consistently been good under Joe Brady, that's a feather in his cap. Now, the Bills have to 100% believe that he has what it takes to survive in this kind of environment, because the pressure cooker is unlike any other job this cycle, because you're basically saying 5 straight AFC championships, 2 AFC title games in that run was not good enough for Sean McDermott to keep his job. The only other way to improve on that is going to the Super Bowl. And so whether or not Terry Pegula wants to admit it, that is now the expectation for this season that Joe Brady is stepping into. And I think you can make the argument that I'd feel uncomfortable giving that opportunity to somebody that is coming in as an offensive play caller that's never even called plays before. And that's one area that I think, listen, Brady can decide too, Ryan, that he doesn't want to call plays at the start. Right. Maybe he brings in a Davis Webb to call the plays for his first shot at it. He's got a relationship with Josh Allen or Schleel House or some other hot young offensive name that he wants to hand the keys over and truly be the CEO. We'll learn about that in the coming days. The report is, and this is what I said was as important as the head coach hire, if it's an offensive-minded coach, I want to know the DC. And reports are that the leading candidate right now is Jim Leonhard, passing game defensive coordinator for the Denver Broncos, was an absolute stud at Wisconsin years ago. Long time been somebody we've talked about. You've been high on the show over the years. That to me is just as important as the head coach hire. Who's going to end up running and rebuilding and retooling this defense?
Right. And let's start there. Jim Leonhard, big fan of his game. In terms of coaching Wisconsin time when he was there, Denver as of late, we saw how the secondary worked there, how he was promoted within former players. So he knows how to, he knows all about the league, obviously had a stint with the Bills. This would be a very good hire. And this would be someone, obviously, that you're going to hand the reins over to and say, build your staff. I'm trusting you to obviously build it to the best of your ability, because Brady's an offensive-minded guy. So he's not going to necessarily have major fingerprints on what that looks like. He might have a preference on some things, but as the CEO or as this head coach of the team, but that's going to be passed on to Leonhard, a former player, a guy that has a lot of experience between the college ranks and now the pro ranks, both as a player and a coach. I like that as a potential hire if that's how it all plays out. And when it comes to Brady, just kind of circling back here, he has 2 full seasons, not even including the interim label. His first season, Josh Allen wins MVP. His second season, James Cook wins the rushing title. Those are not things to just scoff at. He has done a good job in terms of, getting that run game going and utilizing the run well. Getting Josh Allen to stay around that 40 touchdown total. I know he didn't hit it this year. He was at 39 total. But that's still crazy numbers for your quarterback. And had them double-digit wins, had them top 10 offenses his 2 full seasons here. So he's done a lot of good things. But it goes back to, okay, what is his vision for this offense now that he is in the big chair as head coach? And you and I were talking about it again pre-show. coming out of LSU, you can't tell us that he doesn't want to have dynamic playmakers at wide receiver. He was there when he had Joe Burrow at quarterback, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. He's going to want to have that superstar receiver to ease the burden on Josh Allen, ease the burden on the other receivers on this team. And Stephon Diggs likely wanted out because he wasn't being targeted like a wide receiver one when Joe Brady took over as an interim offensive coordinator. But at the same time, we've seen now in Houston, and I know he suffered a serious injury in Houston, but even now with the Patriots, he's not a wide receiver one anymore. Maybe the writing was on the wall there that he's not someone that you can target and play like that. Nice supplemental piece, but no longer that guy. So now I would not be shocked if Brady went out there and along with Brandon Beane said, who can we bring in here via trade, free agency, the draft getting aggressive that can become that wide receiver one for Josh Allen, really open things up. You have someone as wide receiver one, Cooks as your field stretcher. You know what Shakir can do. All of a sudden that wide receiver room will look a lot better. I think that will make Josh Allen's life that much better. And then it'll also help with the run game and James Cook.
So much conversation about this move, and it's an unpopular decision, Ryan. Like, sure. I think that's something that has been evident with the reaction on our insider text line. I mean, you put out the news right as it happened, and I was going through and listen to some of these reactions. I'm never watching the Bills again. I'm sick to my stomach. Backpedaling. Josh had too much say. Keep in house to do the same damn things. Pagula said new direction. So why would we bring back guy that's been in the building for 3 years? Remember what he said, great talent, good coaching. And obviously Joe Brady was a part of that decision. That to me is the biggest question here in all of this is the vision for what they wanted and why they believe that Joe Brady is the guy that's going to provide that. Is this something that in the back of Terry's head, as he's kind of watched this operation over the last 2 years, was this something subconsciously he was thinking about when he made the decision that maybe Joe Brady, even if they didn't want to come out and say it, was kind of the front runner, even if they said they didn't have a front runner?
It could be. And Matt, it's also what was happening behind closed doors this past season that we don't know. What was the talk of the trade deadline? Brandon Beane was out there trying to add a wide receiver to this team, made a big swing for Jalen Waddle, but he didn't want to part ways with his 2026 first. He was willing to give up the 2027 first. Maybe it was Brady going to him saying, man, I need a difference maker in this wide receiver room. It could really open up what I want to do, and it just didn't come to fruition. Maybe that is how it played out. And Beane was realistic and told him, listen, I'll do what I can, but I'm not selling the farm for any of these players, giving up multiple firsts or anything like that. I want to be smart. But maybe that is what it was. Behind closed doors, it was Brady saying, I need this. And yet, despite that, they were productive. They did have a top 10 offense. And now maybe it's Beane saying, okay, we've seen what he can do with his hands tied a little bit. If we can get him that difference maker, I feel like that this offense can go to that next level, which was the talk of it. And then a little bit of pushback, some of those comments about Josh Allen. Peter Schrager said that a note on Josh Allen's role was he was in the room for many of the in-person interviews and got to see behind the curtains on process, as well as offer his opinions on each, but he was not part of the narrowing of the final list or the final head coaching decision. So this was not a final decision that Josh Allen made. Hey, let's stay with this guy that I'm familiar with. He had a certain say, but he didn't have the final say.
It's going to be an intense 2 or 3 months for Brandon Beane, in my opinion, because you not only have to bring in some weapons on offense, but you're probably going to have to rebuild this entire defense, to a large extent. And I know, when you have a daunting list of things that you have to get at the store when you go shopping, it's overwhelming. And we want to take that overwhelming feeling away for you. So we want to send you to Tops Friendly Markets, getting ready for the Super Bowl in a couple of weeks. They have ready to serve fan favorites at the ready this playoff season and for the big game, Let Tops do the cooking, and you'll be the real MVP. Visit takeoutmeals.topsmarkets.com and elevate your food game with great selection of custom cakes, desserts, pizzas, sandwiches, fresh fruit, cheese trays, fried chicken, and so much more. Save time and easily shop with the convenience of no-fee pickup on all game day deals. There are no service fees, no tips, just the best deals in town. Score great deals in time for kickoff or any occasion. Takeoutmeals.topsmarkets.com.
Don't even wait for the Super Bowl. Go tonight. You're going to be on social media complaining about this move. You don't have enough time to go to the kitchen and cook. Go to Tops, get something from that deli, something that you can whip up real quick for the family or that's already made for you. And then you can get back to getting on, Twitter and Facebook and sharing your thoughts.
Great comment here. Yeah, but when we go to Tops, we are 12 million over budget. 12 million. That would be pretty brutal. But I got to say, I've gone shopping over the course of my career where I'm drastically over budget. Let's just say
right.
that.
And again, that's why
wife usually goes shopping
10
for that
10 deals.
Anyway, where do you want to go next?
Let's go with, we don't know about the offensive coordinator job yet, but is there anyone on this offensive coaching staff that you feel like the Bills should be looking to retain? There was a report today too about Austin Gunn interviewing in Jacksonville. Obviously, is that someone you want to retain if possible? Any coaches that come to mind? I guess either side of the ball, knowing full well that Jim Leonard, if he is hired, will have a big say on the defense side of the ball.
It's to me, offensive coordinator, the easiest place to go to would probably be Davis Webb. I mean, you'd have to start kind of going through a lot of these different options. I wonder what's the situation too of Udinsky. Could he leave for a play calling opportunity, or does that become? I don't even know if a guy could get out of a contract if he's an OC for what would be a lateral move, but is a promotion. Like you could probably throw assistant head coach on there or something, right?
You'd have to give him another title. I will say that Jacksonville reportedly already gave him a pay bump if he does come back. I would think that he's probably comfortable there as well. And if he didn't get a head coaching job in this cycle, another year learning from Liam Cohen probably would be a good benefit for him. Not opposed to that idea. Davis Webb's still in the mix for a few of the head coaching gigs, but if that falls through, that would be a promotion for him. Is he willing to take that, come back to Buffalo, work with Josh Allen? You would think so, but you would also have to have some talk there about eventually, are you going to hand the reins over to Webb after a year or so of maybe learning some of the tendencies that Brady has, and then kind of meshing that with what he has learned in his time in Denver? That's all intriguing. And then, you look at this current coaching staff. You've already lost Aaron Cromer to retirement, so you have to figure out what to do for your offensive line coach. Is that promoting from within? Is that finding someone that's out there? A guy that I liked in Atlanta that was available was recently hired in Baltimore, so you got to move quickly there. I saw it in the chat, Rob Boris. I'm all for bringing him back. I think he's a really good tight ends coach. It's definitely someone I would try to bring back there. And then obviously on the other side of the ball, it comes down to your defensive coordinator at the end of the day, most likely. But I feel like Jamil Adai has done a great job with that secondary and with the cornerbacks. I wouldn't mind him coming back. It's all going to be very interesting.
Super chat here from Chris. First in EPA per play. I think he's talking about the Bills offense under Joe Brady. First in scoring drive rate. First in points scored with nobodies at wide receiver. If you hate this hire, go sign the McDermott petition some more. And I think like part of the reaction is you get yourself invested into one of these candidates, right? We didn't talk a whole lot about Joe Brady as a possibility on any of the shows in the lead up to this move. I think in large part, looking back and why I didn't believe that to be the case is because Terry Pegula, seemed to be dropping hints like it wasn't good enough. Like they didn't get over the hump. And, whether or not maybe this tells us that Joe Brady and McDermott weren't tied together, that there was maybe some, I don't want to say dissension, but difference in opinion with how things should be run. Maybe the bubble screens were an element of the offense that Sean McDermott pushed for. Like we won't really know that until we get down the line a little bit and figure all of this out. The other piece is like, okay, we mentioned it, Curtis Samuel edition. That is almost 100% on Joe Brady. And it's not worked out, even though at times he's looked okay in a Bills uniform when he's been on the field. It hasn't worked out. The Keon Coleman one is where he really threw the offensive coaching staff under the bus. Unless Pagula was saying specifically that Sean McDermott was pounding the table for Keon Coleman. And then I just don't get the sense that was the case. So that to me is why I didn't spend more time on Joe Brady. But there were multiple people, Vic Carucci being one of them, who had mentioned that he would not be surprised if Joe Brady ended up being the hire at the end of the day. And I think I remember seeing that and was like, yeah, I don't see that after that press conference, but maybe he had a conversation with somebody that might have been the case all along, which is a whole separate conversation.
Right. And, what a lot of fans were banging the table on was a young offensive mind. If you had someone with play calling responsibilities. And at the end of the day, that's what the Bills ended up hiring, a young offensive mind that has play calling experience. It's a funny league. And I'm not sitting here saying I love the move. I'm just kind of, it's a wait and see mode to see what this looks like with the coaching staff, with their first season together and everything else. But man, we are not that far removed from Brady being one of the hottest names out there a few years ago, based on a year at LSU and this brilliant mind. It's a funny league how it works like that, where you go hot and cold really quick. After last year's MVP campaign with Josh Allen, hot candidate again, getting head coaching interviews. This Bills offense top 10 unit again, 2 interviews with the Raiders, technically a finalist there before the Bills officially, ink him to this deal today. So there was genuine interest out there with other teams. He did a lot of other interviews as well. Obviously, Baltimore.
He was one of the finalists for the Ravens job too.
You're right. And there was talk of him potentially being the OC there if he didn't get the Bills head coaching job. And, there was genuine interest league wide. So I get the Bills fans' frustrations at times based on some of the games. But you can say that for any one of these former head coaches or coordinators like Brian Daboll. You mentioned it. We love Daboll. But there was some 9-6 stinkers mixed in there. There were some games where this offense wasn't going. That's just the nature of the beast. Sometimes the way that you prepare for a game, it just doesn't work out based on what the other team does. And that's what happened this year at times for the Bills in the offense. Now that he's in the big chair, the head coach, it's going to be up to him to make sure that he has the right coaches in place, the right synergy. And that's apparently something that he sold that vision on to Terry Pagula and Brandon Beane.
So check this out. I want to give at Stick to the Model over on X his proper shout out for this, because this is not my idea that I'm bringing to the show. But I do want to talk about this for a second because I think it's really cool perspective. Something that if you didn't want Joe Brady, if you wanted a reset, if you were mad that Brandon Beane was promoted and Sean McDermott was fired, like, it's hard to see the forest through the trees sometimes when you're dealing with that many emotions in a very tumultuous time. But I do think that this perspective here was interesting. So he tweets, in 2016, the Falcons were a tier 1 NFL team. Matt Ryan, MVP, Kyle Shanahan calling plays, Dan Quinn as the culture builder, and they reached the Super Bowl. Obviously, you know how that ended with the Patriots. After that, the Falcons kept Quinn and they let Shanahan walk. Shanahan went to the 49ers, built a modern NFL powerhouse, no Super Bowls yet, but has been to 2. Also no Josh Allen. The Falcons, years of resets, coaching changes, no clear direction. Let this be a case study for Buffalo. Joe Brady is a hot commodity, which you were just talking about, Ryan. Helped Josh Allen get his MVP. Brady is interviewing with multiple teams. The Bills chose to keep him in-house. Atlanta let the future leave. Buffalo didn't. I'm not saying that this is going to ultimately be what gets the Bills over the hump, but if you are close to this situation inside the building and know what Brady means to this group more than people on the outside, I think that there is some merit to the idea of landing on an offense that was this good for this sustained amount of period and then turning the page to trying to figure out a way to get things going on the defense, all while knowing hey, maybe we got to lean back into that whole fastball we were talking about a couple years ago and bring in a couple receivers for the former receiver guru at LSU to figure out how to really maximize his passing game.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because no one here, you and me included, know how this is going to work out. Just like the NFL draft, head coaching jobs are a crapshoot. There have been coaches where they've been hired places. I said, oh, man, that looks like a great move. Mike McDaniel being a great example. I loved that hire for Miami at the time. We know how it worked out. He's the offensive coordinator now for the Chargers. They would collapse late in the season. Their offense eventually got figured out by opposing teams. We just don't know. But at the end of the day, we've heard from Terry Pagula, Brandon Beane, that they just haven't been able to get over the hump. And more times than not in the playoffs, it's been because the defense has let up 30-plus points. It hasn't been an offensive issue. Not the last 2 years either. What was it, 32-29 to the Chiefs in the championship game? They still almost put up 30 points in that one. They put up 30 points against the Broncos despite multiple turnovers. And a lot of, at least one of them was deep in Denver territory. It hasn't been an offensive issue. So if you can even maintain that, and that's not what you're looking for. You're looking to make it better by adding a weapon as wide receiver one, but you can make that better and then bring in a fresh viewpoint, a fresh mind on defense. I'm not going to sit here and say that's not going to work out. In theory, it makes a ton of sense to me. So while he was not in my top 3 candidates when you and I were just ranking them a few episodes ago, I still think there's a very good chance that this works out for the Bills, that they win the division again next year. The Patriots aren't going to have a cupcake schedule. The Bills have a very tough one as well. But I could see the Bills reclaiming the AFC East next year and seeing how this looks with a new defensive mind that's a little bit more aggressive maybe. And if you can get a defense that performs in January, look at Drake May. He has not been good in the playoffs, and yet he's the AFC's quarterback in the Super Bowl because of how good and dominating that defense has been.
Wow, this is so much to take in here. The reactions, what this means potentially. It's a monster move. Like it's a inflection point for an organization that has been at this now for 5 years, trying to win a Super Bowl, and this is the definitive decision that they're making. I also think that this might be, as we settle into this, a realization that maybe the options in this coaching cycle weren't as good as maybe last year, right?
Right.
Which then brings into the conversation something that we've talked about multiple times, that the Bills make this decision on McDermott a year too late. And this was the path moving forward that they were the most comfortable with, because there were question marks about all of the candidates, even the ones that we liked. I'll be the first to admit I was banging the Brian Daboll drum, but there is something to be said for his inability to work with defensive coordinators in New York, 2 iterations of it. And is he going to find the right DC? Is he going to be able to cultivate that relationship? He's a fiery guy, and there's not a lot of flexibility in his coaching style. It feels like, at least that's been the criticism, but I'll tell you where there is a lot of flexibility, Ryan Talbot, over at Amtrak.com, where they make travel planning less stressful with flex fares. Last minute schedule changes can be a headache, but with Amtrak's new, more affordable flex fares, you can adjust your trip without worry. If a concert gets postponed, someone gets sick, or a business meeting gets rescheduled, you can modify your booking without any cancellation or change fees. Head over to Amtrak.com for more details.
Boom. That was a great transition. I will say, and we can get to, the Mutant Moose just keeps coming in with these super chats. I think this is like 3 episodes in a row. Let's go to this first, and then I'll go to another comment here in the chat. So more than anything, I'm frustrated at the stated reasoning behind these moves. We want to try something different, so we promote everyone in the room, and also had a hand in the team's lack of success. Over the years, my biggest knock on the Bills has been their promoting from within, strength and training, defense. Sometimes it's a defensive line or other, this, that, or the other, where I feel like they probably could have gone out, cast a wider net, brought in someone new, and they have. This feels different to me than just promoting from within for a positional coach or something along those lines. We've seen what it looks like 2 years without a weapon at wide receiver. We've seen this for 2 years without your top pass catcher, or at least the person you envisioned as your top pass catcher, Dalton Kincaid, being healthy. He's played on a torn PCL since November of 2024. I don't know if he's getting surgery. You would think that would make sense too in the offseason. But bring him in, get a wide receiver 1 on this team. And then you have a top 10 offense the last 2 years. What does it look like if you do add those weapons? So this feels a little bit different to me than the frustration that I'm seeing and that I'm reading here in this Super Chat Mutant Moose. But I do understand that there have been times where we've talked about these openings and it's like, internal promotion. And, for whatever reason, a lot of the times those haven't worked out well. Some have. But I do understand where you're coming from.
We got to wrap this up. What was the other comment that you wanted to bring into the chat here?
Other comment was from Buffalo Motivated, that he was just a little bit frustrated that they didn't at least wait for Kubiak if this was the decision. I get that frustration. Kubiak was in our top 3, a guy that just had a great performance in the NFC Championship game. Maybe the Bills thought that that being Joe Brady was going to go to the Raiders if they didn't agree to this deal. And that's not a good reason for it necessarily. But he probably had an offer from Baltimore as well. There's no guarantee that Kubiak was going to take this Bills job. And unfortunately, the timing of when they moved on from Sean McDermott, it didn't allow them to get that initial interview in with Kubiak. So they would have had to have waited until after the Super Bowl. I can see the argument for it, but man, you and I talked, Matt. It's all about building your coaching staff as well. And waiting until after the Super Bowl, that would have been difficult.
You only do that if you think that like Clint Kubiak is this year's version of Ben Johnson. And I don't know that anybody is necessarily in that ballpark with the candidate that he is. He's done a great job there. I mean, but limited sample size of calling plays. He's got arguably the best wide receiver in the league, a really good offensive line. What he's done with Sam Darnold there, I don't think you can poke a lot of holes in that. But unless you are convinced that that is your guy, you're risking – like he's got to be in a completely different tier than you view Joe Brady if that's the way that you're going to go about it. So I don't have a huge issue with that only because of the timing of this whole thing. By the time you get to 2 weeks from now, a lot of these candidates are going to be gone. Leonard could be gone. Morris could be gone. Schwartz could be gone. All of the big DC kind of hires could be gone. And so, sure, you get your guy in Kubiak, but where does that leave you on the defensive side of the ball? That's the thing that I think was precluding me from wanting to kind of wait and see and see where kind of things fall there.
Yeah, and maybe Kubiak lands the Raiders job. They have been tied to him since for a few weeks now, and first overall pick, again, a lot of cap space, but maybe he just gets to go back into that cycle for one more year where another year of play calling wouldn't hurt him in terms of the eyes of other teams. Unfortunately, that means the Bills won't be involved in that if everything goes well here with Joe Brady, but we don't even know what this would have looked like or what his level of interest was because they could not talk directly to him.
Mets asked, can you guys see Dable as OC? This will be the last question. We'll be back. I mean, heck, we might even, as this thing kind of progresses, we'll be back later tonight, depending on what kind of other news there is. But I got to go pick up my son, so I got to go. But he asked about Dable as a possible OC candidate. He's already accepted the Titans OC job contingent on not getting the Raiders head coaching job. So he's pretty much out as an OC candidate. And so we'll go from there. All right, we got to wrap this thing up. For Ryan Talbot, I'm Matt Parrino. We will be back. Keep it locked and loaded. A lot to come over the next couple of days. Tough questions are coming for Brandon Beane, for Joe Brady. If Terry Pagula steps back to the podium, we'll see. I doubt it. But it's going to be a very important week as we kind of flesh this thing out. I don't have one overarching reaction to this or definitive statement on what kind of hire this is. We don't have all the information yet. But I don't necessarily think it's as doom and gloom as the initial reaction is, but more to come. I'm reserving the right to change my mind. Take care, everybody.